We have Charlotte Harrington, who's CEO of Belu, the company that gives 100% of their profits to WaterAid. I'm sure everybody has drunk Belu water. We have Alastair Tyson, who's project manager at Zero Carbon Forum, who's got 25 years in the industry, and Zero Carbon Forum does project-specific work, helping to reduce and offset carbon emissions. We have Candice Brown. You'll know her from Great British Bake Off, now owns the Green Man pub in Bedfordshire, which focuses heavily on sustainability, and I plan to make them a visit out there, and also to the Culpeper in Spitalfields, which aims to use hospitality as a force for good, and run by Peter Weeden, the group sustainability manager. Okay, so this session we're going to be looking at how hospitality can be made more sustainable. We've talked a bit about energy. We'll be talking again about energy later, so this is mainly kind of non-energy chat, although it's difficult to keep energy completely out of a conversation like this. We'll be talking about what people are doing already, what people are going to be doing in the future. It's a huge topic. We're going to be covering relationships with consumers, customers, and asking how can you be more sustainable within your own establishment, and then also crucially, how can you engage your team not to be the people that leave all the gadgets on all day and night. So we're welcome to Alastair and Peter. Charlotte, let's start with you. Give me a feeling about sustainability, your attitudes towards it, and how it's manifesting itself in your business.
Sure. So Belu was founded on the basis that there was a belief that business could help some of the world's problems. So we've always had, the environment very much at our core, and I think we're quite fortunate in that respect, because everything that we've been doing and we do is on the basis of understanding the impact that we have first. So there was a lot of chat in the first session around data. It's one of the biggest inputs that we take to help guide our decision making. So we are very much of the belief that there are different ways of doing things, better ways of doing things. We're continually revising what we do and our approach to the world. So we're known as a bottled water company, but we're actually moving into filtration, and for us that's enabling hospitality to move away from their reliance on single use.
Thank you. Candice, would you like to offer some thoughts along the same lines?
Yeah, so I've had my pub for about 3.5 years. Certainly a global pandemic was not in the business plan when we took over, but we are still open, and obviously that's an incredible thing, and it's ever evolving, ever adapting, and it's one of those things. I was brought up in pubs. Mum and Dad run pubs for 25 years, but that's very different, I think, the old school kind of wet pubs to pubs and bars and restaurants now. So being a country, a village pub, freehold as well. So myself and my younger brother own the pub, and looking at ways all the time that we can do what we can to obviously offset footprint and be as sustainable as possible, but also learning as well. We have quite a young team, quite a small team as well. So it's getting them to understand, and I try and sort of use some of my teacher head type thing. I used to be a secondary school teacher, and kind of using that. I always want to learn, but I want to sort of teach and guide as well. So I think it's one of those things to be brought on and asked more about this. I was like, I'm happy to join in the panel, but also I'm more here to probably ask questions and learn as well, because I think there's so much more that I and the pub and we can be doing, but I think as sort of the industry as a whole. So it's an exciting place to be, an exciting thing to learn about and to move on with. And one of the first things we did do was before any of this, the first things we did have installed was the SmartDispense system, and it has proved to be one of the most beneficial things we have had put in. At the time was still the very old building. We've now got a newer bit to it, which we've spoken a little bit about before, about the difficulties there. So still looking at learning and becoming more sustainable and doing what we can to help, really.
Peter, do you have similar experiences?
Slightly different. So we're independent group pubs, which run 4 pubs very differently with kind of autonomous management teams, but we're trying to navigate our way to be a force for good in hospitality, you know, using our position where we've got, I guess, slightly bigger voice than other businesses maybe, to try and promote good practice and to think about the ways that we can manage our impact environmentally and try and use our platform to leverage some bigger change throughout the industry, which is notoriously bad for doing the wrong thing quite badly. So that's where we're at the moment. So we're trying to establish where we are, doing some measuring and trying to make big steps with behavioural change, and then try and use our experience to try and help others to do better things, but also to learn along the way, because there's a lot to be learned.
How do you engineer things in?
So specifically engineering a role for sustainability, making sure it's in people's contracts, in their job descriptions, making sure that we've got a daily management sheet which spells out very clearly who the green monitor is, who's in charge of making sure lights are switched off, ovens are turned down, hobs are switched off. It is that person's responsibility for the duration of their shift. Their performance is measured and it's returned to in their one-on-one job chats, in their quarterly reviews, all those things. So it's part and parcel of the expectation of us as a business is put.
And how does this go down? Are people resentful of it, or are you only recruiting the sort of people who are going to fit the bill anyway?
If you manage it into a business and you engineer it properly to support people, make sure they've got the information they need, make sure they've got the resources they need, the equipment they need, you know, the support generally, and you've got the right culture within a building, then it's a good, positive thing that everybody buys into, and it's something which you then rely on to deliver your product, because it's part of what you do. You know, it's a good thing. If you expect it to happen as a bolt-on that people have to do on top of their job rather than as part of their job, then I think people would resent it. So you really have to engineer it in a smarter way.
Can you do this in a running business, do you think, or you can only work if you've got a business that's starting with these principles at the core? I
think if you've got the will to do it as an owner or a management team, then you just have to chip off little bits as you go. You have to engage the team. You have to, talk to people. I mean, it's all really basic stuff. But
similar to what you're saying about having the green monitor and things like that. It's almost going back to school.
Yeah, totally.
When you have litter monitors and you have litter pickers and you have lunchtime monitors and you have someone that turns the light off and puts the chairs on the table.
Yeah, totally.
It's literally that, but in a work environment. So it's almost those grassroots, those ground roots there, and just reinforcing and going, okay, you used to do it at school, or these are the things we've learned, and doing it. Then it's
there is a lot of hand-holding, but it doesn't have to be in a patronising way.
No.
We have a water monitor in the kitchen, so every day it's their responsibility to make sure people have got water, that they're hydrated, and it helps us think about it, and it sounds patronising, but
I think it's a really good way of thinking about it.
We benefit by communicating about these things and making it important to us. You put value on something and it becomes important. The cost of something isn't necessarily the only thing that will drive the behavioural change. The value system that you put in place as a business can drive that change as effectively, if not more effectively. And societally, we have to value these things. If it's just a cost, and sorry to get into carbon so early, but if it's just a cost that you say, this is what it costs, then we'll pay for it. Well, we won't pay for it, somebody else will pay for it, or the environment will pay for it. We want delivery, we want it now, and then it seems really cheap because delivery is free. But delivery isn't free. An operator will pay, or the delivery driver on a low wage will pay, or somewhere there'll be a cost. So it's about taking those costs on board and saying we're going to build it into our business, internalise the cost rather than externalise it, and say, well, let's deal with it, find smart ways of engineering our business to be efficient, and to have good staff retainment, to have low recruitment costs, to look after our teams, to make them feel like they're really part of a well-oiled machine that values them, to buy good produce that is made the right, all the things that we know we should do, but business tells us we have to cut the margins, we have to cut the corners, we have to, cut the payroll. And it's hard, I think our biggest investment is in our payroll. That's our training, that's our development, that's our retention, that's our workforce who we want to be there for when, you get that peak time and it's busy and you really need an extra pair of hands.
Let me bring Alastair in, because I know you advise firms on how to get their staff pointing in the right direction. Can you tell us about that?
I think Peter's made some very good points. It's about sharing the load. It's not about one person in the organisation who has a sustainability tag or job title. It's about different people from top to bottom. Literally starts at the CEO right down to the kitchen porter, the cleaner. It doesn't matter. Everybody has an impact because they can leave the lights on, they can leave the hot tub on, they can leave the dishwasher on. They don't do it intentionally, but it's a case of if everybody's aware, they haven't explained to them why you're doing things. Biggest thing is why. Why do we do this? Well, we're doing this because we need to become more sustainable. We need to cut carbon from our business and hopefully cut cost. And it's a case of the more people who know, the more synergy you get within the business. It becomes a positive cycle. And I've seen it from numerous businesses that they start. It's hard to start. Let's get that clear. It is hard to start if you haven't started. But there are so many businesses out there to help. So some of which are here today, but ourselves, you can start with very simple things. Make a plan. And it might be just a plan to start and measure your footprint. And then engage the people within your business and say, these are the elements within our footprint that have a big impact. Start with the biggest that you can, and then engage your people, and then make some actions. And then when you do good things, shout about it. Tell people, explain why you've done it and what they've got out of it. We're in hospitality. Have a drink at the end of the night saying, we've done this, end of the month, whatever it is, your own quarterly get-together. But it's a case of if people are involved and things are explained, you will get better impact and you will find that things are easier to do, even though it is.
Are there big firms at the moment that have set out a list as prescriptive as the one we've heard, with this person to do that and signing a contract and all that sort of thing? Are there big firms operating on those principles, or is it just something like small idealistic ones?
No, there are big firms, and some of which are ahead of the curve, ahead of the game, and are really good, and they're seeing the benefit in their top line as well as their bottom line savings, because they're able to rely upon it within their marketing. They can rely upon it because they're measuring and they're acting and they're trying to make a difference, and they're communicating with their customers as much as they are with their staff. So it's a circular thing.
And communicate with their customers.
Yeah.
The customers are interested, are they?
Customers are interested, and especially the sort of Generation Z, as we're now calling them, which I don't like, but that's kind of what we've labelled them, sadly. But they're more in tune. They are more knowledgeable than we were when we were growing up.
Charlotte, you're one of the sort of virtuous brands. Are you finding people are cooperating with you when we clearly need to cooperate together and all pointing in the same way? Do you think things are changing?
I think they definitely are. I think, pre-Blue Planet, I think most people would come to us and say, we know you're a charity water brand, you give your money, you give money to Water Aid, that's amazing. Post-Blue Planet, they said, tell us a little bit more about this PAS 2060 carbon neutrality. One of those things that would be in all of the marketing literature and nobody would be interested in up until that point. And now people start with, talk to us about how do we change the impact of our water service, what can we do, how do we do things differently. And actually, it's people like Peter's group of pubs that we're working with who are just genuinely trying to do the right thing. And we don't have all the answers, we don't profess to have all the answers, but we are probably one of those businesses that's willing to take risks and try things. Because we're a smaller business, we're a bit more agile, there aren't lots of stakeholders and things to manage that bigger businesses have to grapple with. And often, we try things, we learn from them, we're quite open about that, because I think it's really important that we share those learnings, both with our customers in hospitality, but also with our supply base, because we need them to come on this journey with us. You talked earlier about Scope 3 emissions. Our biggest emissions sit with our supplier base. So influencing them to do things differently and engage in different ways of fueling the glass furnace, for example, is really, really critical if we're going to have any significant impact So yeah, I think the conversation is undoubtedly changing for the better.
And could you estimate how much it has changed already and how far there is to go? Are we looking at something like 5% of people interested, 10%, 30%? Give me a feeling about it.
I don't know about giving you a figure. I mean, I would say the majority of our income inquiries these days are about how do we move away from single use. So, 5 years ago, it would have been primarily about bottled water. Now people just want to talk about actually how can you help me achieve my target to reduce my footprint? How can we learn from the lessons in the industry? Who else are you working with? So I would say, it's very few businesses that don't have a sustainability agenda, and most of them don't have experts in-house. We certainly don't. So we rely on forums a bit like this to challenge our thinking and to broaden our thinking most of the time, actually. So I think, collaboration across the industry for suppliers as well as operators is critical if we're going to find a way through this.
Candice, is this something that you've experienced, the difficulty of knowing whether suppliers' claims are truthful or not?
Yeah, for sure. I think we've seen some interesting things happen at the pub. Very kind of interesting in that we do our bit and we recycle, and sort of that whole thing about talking to the staff and explaining the recyclable things, these have to go in the recyclable. And actually, like I said, we have a young team, we're a pub in the middle of a village. Our KPs are mainly kind of GCSE sort of A-level students, and we're teaching them. And one of the younger lads, he's great, and he's the one that on a weekend will go out and he will break down all the recyclable, put it all the recycling, put it in the recyclable bin, and do all of that. Whereas we've had those issues where the bins are full, we can't do anything with it. Well, no, because you put in 3 boxes that you haven't flattened down, or you haven't ripped, and it's literally going back to those basics and explaining and those things. And then you have the bin people turn up and leaning out the window and having to chase them down the road because we've watched them put the recycling into general waste. And you just think it's got to be kind of along the lines. And I mean, there's been stand-up rows. I mean, I've chased them down the road in my pyjamas. I'm not ashamed at all. I mean, that was a sight.
That's a shot for the national newspapers.
I mean, there's probably been worse pictures, to be honest. But Sophie, who one of the managers, she's the same. And because we do feel when we're doing our bit, it's almost that, why is not everybody else not? But it's one of those things we're still working on, and we still have those conversations, and we will say, and they'll go, oh yeah, but, and we say, right, okay, you have those conversations, and the conversation later on the phone. And the same with deliveries. We're noting that as probably everybody, deliveries have become less because of increase in fuel prices and so on. So maybe those consolidation of deliveries, sometimes not getting deliveries, having to go and pick them up ourselves and things like that. So having to find those ways and we can work. But what we're kind of doing is we're asking for less and less cardboard. So things were coming in cardboard holders, like our fresh fruit and produce. We use local suppliers as much as possible so they're not travelling as far, but bringing them in cardboard. They're then going into the bin. So we've actually had those conversations saying, use the plastic ones, drop them off in that, take them back the next day. That really simple thing that you would think would happen anyway sometimes doesn't, but actually we've had those conversations and that's now what's happening. They're being reused rather than ending up with 30 bloody recyclable cardboard things that have to be broken down and thrown away because they've got wet or they've got a slight tear in. Actually, we can reuse the plastic heavy-duty ones and things like that. We're always on the lookout for more sustainable brands and how we can do it, and we do. We're lucky in that we are kind of freehold, so we can kind of make those changes when and as we want to, obviously according to contracts and things. And one of the big things we use is the oil company, Oilico. So we use oil, obviously hospitality is one of those things that does get used a lot. And we do change it very regularly, which we obviously should be happening. But obviously that oil then doesn't get thrown away, it goes into one of their designated bins, they come and collect it, we get money back for every litre of oil that they take away, and that then gets reused into biodiesel fuel. This is where I'm good with the scientific side of things, because I can go blah, 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 and they go, yeah, it's that. And I think we try and do those things, but like I said, we want to learn all the time, but we are facing challenges, and I think you do these things, but then you're up against challenges because of things like increase of living costs, increase of fuel prices, so everything you've maybe put in place, or you've consolidated your deliveries to certain days, then changes because that company or the person with the supplier is now not delivering on that day because of things that's happening there, and so then it's kind of back to the drawing board and thinking again. And it's ever changing, but I think it's one of those things where you go, right, okay, it's a problem for the moment. What do we do about it? How do we change it? Put that thing in place and then move on. And I think one of the things...
Let me bring in Alastair here, because, I mean, where do you find the data for all this sort of stuff? We were talking earlier about managing energy data, but we're now talking about sustainability across the board.
Yeah.
I mean, are people just sort of reaching out and plucking, oh, here's a solution, or is there good data behind this sort of practice?
So data is, let's be honest, it's the key to how we're able to measure and measure better. At the minute, a lot of people are doing their footprints based on 2019. So
I love data too.
yeah, but there's only so much data you can have.
Well, so we visited Andy Cato last week at Wild Farm Grange, and he says his dad says that there's paralysis by analysis, which I love the saying, because we're doers. We are in this industry because we love doing stuff, and data can be so helpful for us. But if we get bogged down in too much data, there are simple things which we don't need data for.
True.
Turning the oven off.
Yep.
I don't need data for it.
But it also helps.
But I do see that. Yeah, I see the benefits.
If you turn that switch into a pound note or a pay rise or a pool for, some sort of bonus or a team day out, a different part of our business works with Fridays, and they're on target to save £700,000 from turning their stuff off overnight, and that's like the profit from 7 restaurants. So we've effectively made their estate bigger by just getting people to turn things off. We've changed the behavioural change, and now they're finding they're able to get so many more things through. So whilst, yes, I take your point about you can overanalyze data. I spend a lot of time looking at spreadsheets. It's not that thrilling. But at the same point, there is stuff that we can gain from it. So
I think it's the key, though, is having that data and doing something about it, rather than waiting until we've got all the answers before we do something. And so I'm not having a dig there.
I think the thing is that, typically in a large business, then the accountants call the shots, and accountants want data. And in my experience, I'm a little bit of a data skeptic, because I think lots of things are really hard to measure. And particularly when you're getting aggregate things of, I'm going to compare this action with this action, and we're going to aggregate them all together. I'm a bit of a data skeptic. But on the other hand, I'm not running a corporation, and the accountants do, and they want those numbers.
But I think we have to, as an industry, we have to look quite carefully at what we're trying to do. We talk about always growing up businesses. We talk about increasing our footfall and doing all these fantastic things to grow our businesses. But if you're talking about the fundamental problem we have is that we're consuming too much. So we need to shrink our way out of the problem rather than growing our way out of the problem. But the narrative for our shareholders collectively is that they want growth. So it's about marrying those two things up and saying, well, it may be that we just don't spend quite as much, but we manage to maintain a bottom line through a more efficient business. And I think the over-reliance on everybody wanting to grow, everybody wanting to get more sites, everybody wanting to reduce their overhead burden by saying, well, we'll go from 5 sites to 10 sites, and then suddenly we'll have a more efficient business. Everybody's geared up for this exponential growth, and I don't know that it's necessarily the immediate solution. I think we have to stop and take a breath for a minute and say, well, should we just see where we are? Start making some of the small changes that have a big effect, because once you start making those cultural changes, then they really grow and they have a lot more wider benefit.
I just want to have a very quick round. We gave Will and Ellis a chance to just offer a few sort of key thoughts. Starting with you, Charlotte, just a few punchy key thoughts, because we're just slightly over time already.
Okay.
keep it brief.
Takeaways.
So I think, have a look at your supply base. Who are you working with? Who could you learn from? Have a look at the data you've got, the data that they have, and understand that. And I think more than anything, take some action. There's probably one or two small things you could take away from today that you could probably action tomorrow and could just start you on that journey, because I think there's a real positive momentum. As you just get started, it's not that difficult. You don't need to have a 200-point action plan. Just start making some small incremental changes.
Okay, thank you, Candice.
I think just ask questions. There's no such thing as a silly question. Be open to learning and education the whole time. Things are changing all the time. If you make a mistake, do you know what? Sorry, didn't work. Going to try again. Going to try and be better. I think it's about being responsible for your actions. Ask questions all the time and just keep learning and be open to the ever-changing environment, because we need to be adaptable.
Alastair.
I'm going to say a little bit about data, but basically measure your footprint. Find out where your emission hotspots are, even if it's just at the top level, even if it's using a free calculator like ours or somebody else's. Just find out where they are. Find the people within your business, encourage them, nurture them, support them, and then do something. Act, because we haven't got long. It really is. We haven't got long.
Peter, we haven't got long, did you say?
No.
No, that's a dreary thought to end with. Peter?
I think just engineer change into your business. Just do it. Just put it in your job descriptions, put it in your daily practices. Just say you're going to do it. Tell your team you want to do it.
Just
the team will follow.
Just get on with
it.
Yeah.
Small changes.
Just do it. Okay, look, thank you very much, panel. That's been a really good panel, very broad-ranging discussion, and thank you for our comments from the audience as well.